It's been a media roll-up frenzy. How close are we to this particular deal getting done?
Look, the industry is seeing significant pressure. Subscribers are leaving multi-channel television, over-the-top TV. I mean, look at what's happened to Netflix. Netflix is up almost 50% year to date. The business is exploding. Consumers are giving up linear television and moving to internet-delivered on-demand television, and advertising is suffering. All the ad dollars are moving. When you look at the growth of Facebook, Google reported last night, ad dollars are moving to mobile, and they're moving away from TV. And so there is this pressure, this growing pressure on legacy media companies. And so you're either selling the way a Time Warner, a Scripps, Fox isn't, even Murdoch is now selling. So you're either selling or you're buying. And I think looking at Viacom and CBS, Shari Redstone, National Amusements, as you mentioned, is the controlling shareholder of both. I don't think they want to sell these companies. The most logical first step is to get them to scale. These companies are too small. They look like pimples on a media landscape dominated by giants.
So what's to sort out? I mean, clearly there are new synergies. Viacom has started to turn around a little bit, new management, maybe, getting its act together. CBS is finally perhaps seeing the writing on the wall. Maybe Les Moonves wants that studio after all. What will get this done?
Look, I don't think Les Moonves really wants to do this. I think, when you look at why didn't this happen, we were talking about, why didn't this happen back in 2016? I mean, there's really one reason why this didn't proceed. Moonves didn't want it to happen. I think the reality is he liked running his standalone company, but I think, as you just mentioned, the writing's on the wall. They lost NFL on Thursday. Fox outbid them. The writing's going to be on the wall for 2022 when the rights expire for Sunday afternoon. CBS isn't big enough. And so Les doesn't want to do this. My guess is Les increasingly becomes expendable in this process, meaning at the end of the day, while I think they'd love to have Les running the combined company, if Les isn't on board, you have to do it. There's too much industrial logic to move forward. And so I think what you end up seeing is a Viacom-led combined company.
Well, let me just push back a little bit.
Sure.
I don't think Les is completely expendable here. And if he doesn't want this to get done, he has a way for it to not get done, right? So there has to be an incentive for him too. And CBS, after all, brings the revenue.
Well, look, Les can certainly not want it to get done. But at the end of the day, the company is owned by National Amusements. So Les works for National Amusements, effectively, a board, and that board works for National Amusements, the largest shareholder. And so Les doesn't really have a lot of ability to push back. Look, I think the reality is when you think about the fact that Disney is buying Fox, so Bob Iger and the Walt Disney Company are saying they don't have enough scale to compete. Rupert's selling his company. Jeff Bewkes is selling his company to AT&T. There isn't really a leg to stand on for CBS to stand up there and say, we're fine, we're going to be okay, we're big enough. It's not a logical, credible argument.
Viacom does need this to happen too, though.
They do.
Big time. I mean, their stock has been suffering, whereas CBS's stock is doing really just fine.
Well, I guess fine through a lens of, yeah, it hasn't gone down meaningfully over the last, call it 12 months relative to Viacom, but relative to the growth you've seen in stocks like Netflix or Facebook or Google, all of this whole industry is suffering. None of these companies are doing well in legacy media. All of them are really challenged when you look at, look, Disney over the last 2 years hasn't grown at all.
Would CBS be able to take advantage of this where the scale that Viacom would offer, the international distribution?
I think the point is that CBS and Viacom need to get a lot bigger, meaning this is just step one. You're going to see a multiple-step transaction. Step one, combine the companies. It's quick. It's relatively easy to do. You can do it before the end of 2018 and be in a position to do other acquisitions or transactions in 2019 and beyond. Maybe they sell to a larger company. I mean, maybe a company like Verizon. Maybe there's some larger player that enters the space and wants to own all of Viacom. Or maybe Viacom turns around and buys things like Sony's entertainment business. There's new management at Sony as of yesterday. Maybe there's opportunities to acquire assets that weren't available. But either way, this in and of itself is not big enough. It's going to have to get even bigger.
So where are the growth opportunities when, assuming this happens and it's a combined company and they,
Sure.
merge and there's international there and there's a studio there and they have all their bits together under one roof. At that point, what do they concentrate on?
Well, look, I think Les Moonves deserves a tremendous amount of credit, not just for being a great programmer, but for the foresight of launching CBS All Access. It was a great idea to basically put the whole CBS programming lineup and make it available as a standalone product away from the traditional bundle. It's got 2 million subscribers, but in order to make that 10 or 20 million subscribers and make that a big business, you need Nickelodeon content, you need Paramount content, you need a lot more content to create a bundle of content. And so I think the opportunity to build a far more robust direct-to-consumer property is what Viacom brings to CBS. And then obviously just the greater scale and size as step one. You're going to need a lot of scale as you try to pursue sports rights in 2022 and beyond, because you're fighting against companies like a much larger Disney, a much larger AT&T Time Warner, and a very large Comcast NBC.
Rich, you've done the math. What's the valuation of a combined company, with the correct valuation?
Look, I think you have to figure out kind of what synergies look like, and I think the challenge right now is just how big the revenue synergies are. I mean, we think right now that you're looking at probably 700 million plus of just straight cost synergies. That number, again, that's rough estimate. But then you have revenue synergies. And so the question is as you add CBS and the power of the NFL over the next several years, they have it through the end of 2022 on Sunday afternoon, how does that get used to shield Viacom so that Viacom doesn't suffer what happened with Charter last year, where Charter ended up repackaging and hurting Viacom? If that ends up being significant leverage, you could see synergies rise dramatically above $1 billion, and then the whole company starts to look incredibly inexpensive. We're talking about single-digit multiples of free cash flow. It becomes a very, very compelling stock.
Finally, Rich, once we've moved our attention away from this particular deal, whether it happens or no, where else should we be looking in media?
Well, look, I think, we're kind of at an interesting moment in time. Government's going to rule over the course of the courts are going to rule, actually, over the course of the next, call it 4 or 5 months in terms of what happens with AT&T Time Warner. Assuming that deal goes through as we think it will, you're going to have a very large AT&T Time Warner. If that didn't go through, you have a lot of assets that become available that could get broken up and could be a feeding frenzy for those assets in the market. And so I think before we even figure out what's next, everyone's going to be waiting to see whether or not they get a shot at those Time Warner assets.